All right, I think I've been given the green light to start this session. So welcome everyone to Fast Forward 2030. This is a short but very critical and important session and subject titled Sustainable Transport Solutions, Building Sustainable Cities Through Innovation in Transport Systems. The session is obviously organized around three speakers. We have Alex Mwanzo, Andrew Hughes, Nadir Halawani. They come from three different regions, all work around the field of transportation at different scales, from cyclists to cars to aviation, but all within the concern about renewable energy regions which are now in resource crisis modes. And we're going to be sort of viewing their work, their entrepreneurship, and their creativity and innovation in sort of mediating and working within crises of resources, of government, and of economic challenges. And I think we're going to be starting with Nadir Halawani. And if I may, maybe each of you, if you would like to say just sort of a sentence or two background about yourself and your work, and then please feel free to start your presentation. So over to you, Nadir.
Samar, thank you so much. And Mariam also, thank you for inviting me over to this presentation or this workshop. My name is Nadir Halawani. I'm an engineer and a business, and I'm an engineer by education. I recently also got awarded my MBA, my degree, second degree, and I run a few companies, and one of them is Wasil. I'm also the bicycle mayor of Tripoli, my hometown. Bicycle mayor as in part of the project of a Dutch social enterprise called Bikes. So we have many bicycle mayors around the world, and we all work together towards a more sustainable future through bicycles, of course. So again, in short, I'll be talking about Wasil. Wasil is a bicycle delivery, last mile delivery startup. It's based in Tripoli, my own hometown, with big hopes and aspirations to be covering Lebanon as a country, as a first step, and maybe and hopefully more countries in the future. So just allow me a second to be able to share my screen, my presentation. Samar, can you see my presentation, please?
Perfect. Yes, we can.
So again, we're starting with Wasil Bicycle Couriers. So Wasil is Lebanon's first bicycle delivery business. I wouldn't hide the fact that there was this tiny project back in 2012, I guess, that I was part of course. It was in Beirut. It was a small cooperative of bicycle couriers. But in terms of a business, a fully well-structured business, this is the first. So Wasil is is a business that is located in Tripoli, my hometown. And to give you some context, Tripoli has been since the 1940s very famous for its stunning cycling scene. If you look up stories from that era, from that time of Tripoli, you're going to find a lot of cyclists, people on bicycles back then, and that was because, of course, the Ottoman presence, and then therefore the French presence in the country. So the bicycle was quite famous in Tripoli, so much that the municipality itself had licenses for the bicycles. So if you own the bicycle, you can always go to the municipality, pay a little fee, a very minimal fee, and get some benefits in return. So what is so special about Tripoli as a city that can be completely perfect for cycling? One is that it has wide roads as opposed to other cities in Lebanon. And number two, it's a perfectly flat city. We have a few uphills, but they are on the suburbs. And number two is, of course, the great weather. Lebanon is a country, or in the the Levantine, we have a great weather that is mostly warm. We do have, of course, a cold weather, a cold winter, but it's not that cold. It's not doesn't snow in Tripoli, for instance. So again, people of Tripoli are used to cycle, and this is a photo that I've taken myself. I'm also a photographer, and this is a photo I've taken myself. And the people in the background, they in the presentation, they look like in their 60s and 70s. So you can imagine that they've learned how to cycle when they were really young. And number two is, of course, there's a lot of kids today, especially during the crisis in Lebanon. And I'm not going to go through the crisis because I assume that almost all of you know about it. Lebanon has been going through a really hard time since 2019, financially speaking, economically, and also it applies to the social aspect. It's a socio-economic crisis. So people are resorting now to bicycles. And in parallel, as my work as a bicycle mayor in Tripoli, we've been working on developing and growing a community of cyclists. And that community has been actually working actively in promoting for cycling as a main means of transport. So why am I even telling you all these things? The reason why we started Wasl is because the crisis has forced a lot of people to switch from regular modes of transport, let's say cars and motorcycles, so anything that is modernized, to simple ways like walking, for instance, or cycling. So we're kind of benefiting from the crisis, taking advantage of the crisis and the fact that people are rethinking their modes of transport to start this business that is called Wasl. So Wasl works basically on promoting cycling, of course, so that is one. Number two is we are promoting or we're helping local businesses transport their packages and parcels across the city for a lower fee, of course. And number three is, of course, reducing the corporate footprint or trying to replace the deliveries that were always used or always done, sorry, on motorcycles and cars to replace them now with a zero emission means that is the bicycle. And of course, in addition to creating job opportunities to the city's youth. هلا again listing the problems in Lebanon, the reasons why we started Wasl is again number one is the fuel prices. In Lebanese pounds and the local currency, the fuel has increased in 10 or 20 folds since the beginning of the crisis. The cars and motorized vehicles, they have to be maintained using, of course, the external currency, which is US dollars, while as local currency has lost so much of its value. And so on, and of course, and so forth. I'm just gonna get over. I think like I need to move on quicker. So when Wasl first started off, we had two services. One is a same day delivery. It's like the standard delivery. So you call us and we pick up your order and deliver it during the day. We give you the allotted time. And number two is the premium. This is the fast track. If you're in a hurry, you want somebody to be sent over to you right now, you can pay a little extra, a little premium, and get the fast track delivery. And of course, we have more services like the expat service. If you happen to be Lebanese, living abroad, and you want to just transport something from the supermarket to your family's house, you can always do it through Wasl. And we also outsource couriers to certain restaurants. If they have a peak hour, peak time where they need extra delivery people, we can just give them one of our guys, one of our people working there, and so on. So basically, so far, the ordering system is based on existing services like WhatsApp and a fleet management software that we use internally. So all you have to do is basically just call the number on WhatsApp, text us something. The dispatcher, the person that is on the phone now, Diana, is in charge of receiving the order, clarifying the requirement, and asking you all the right questions if there's anything missing. You just have to wait for a certain amount of time, and of course, the driver will be at your door. So why did I start Wasil myself? And what is so um, personal to me in Wasil? I decided at the beginning that Wasil needs to be employing boys and girls at the same time, of course. Those people are highly professional. They're university graduates. They happen to be cyclists as well before working with Wasil. And of course, they're very friendly and respectful. So far, we have an operations manager, or what we call a team leader. We also have a dispatcher, the person in charge of receiving the calls and the orders. And number 3 is, of course, we have the couriers. So how many drivers do we have today? We have 5. So 5 bicycles and 5 drivers. And we're serving only in Tripoli, again, on the hopes of growing and covering more of Lebanon. Thank you so much. This is my presentation. I'm open for questions, of course. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadir. I'm thinking maybe we keep going and we keep our Q&A until the end, unless if Mariam has any. Okay, I think, yeah, we're good. So we can move on to the next question. And then I think, please, you can just gather your questions and we'll definitely have a Q&A. But after each presentation, if you have a specific question for that presentation, please feel free to drop it in the chat box and we can definitely read it out. So I'm not sure, Alex or Andrew, would you like to go next? Andrew, you seem to have.
Sure. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Are you okay, Alex, with Andrew going next? Yeah. Okay.
Andrew can start.
Go ahead, Andrew. The mic is yours.
Hopefully you can see my slides now.
Yes, yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, thanks for inviting me on today. My name's Andrew Hughes. I'm the Chief Executive of TripShift. I'm sitting here today in a cold and wet London. So to hear Nadia talk about the warm, pleasant environment of Tripoli was painful. However, I also, whilst I'm in London today, I did spend 3 years living in Beirut, so I know Lebanon during that time and enjoyed my time there, and even to this day, always pick out a Lebanese restaurant if ever I can find one. So there you go. My background is actually aviation, although these days I work in carbon tracking for businesses, specifically looking at travel and transport. So TripShift is a platform that we've created. It's a business platform. It's targeted at businesses, and it allows businesses to track, to manage, in other words, reduce, and also to report their transport-related carbon emissions. We've made it a very simple platform. It's automated in order to make sure we get a high level of engagement in the platform. It doesn't need lots of repeated data entry, and it's targeted towards both the organization and to the employees. And as I said, really we unlock the power of data. And in this case, that data highlights an organization's impact from travel and transport, but also allows them to start thinking about how they can reduce or manage and reduce that impact over time. In the context of the wider environment, of course, that data we collect also helps us to understand how we can modify future transport infrastructure, how we can look at transport networks to configure them into a more sustainable environment as we move forward. Let me try and get the slide to change. Good. So the magic numbers are 25% and 75%. 25% is the amount of total global carbon emissions which come just from travel and transport. And 75% really is the average scope 3 emissions that, or the total. If you think of an average business, you know, this is very average in sort of global terms. A typical business, about 75% of their scope 3 emissions are completely derived from travel and transport. So we looked at travel and transport scope 3. Obviously, everybody is kind of aware of the carbon and the climate crisis now. And so we wanted to look at we wanted to look at travel and transport as a niche and understand how we could work in that niche to try and actually make some impact and build a strong business as a result. The drivers behind that are increasingly sort of global regulation now. So in Europe and the UK, in America and various other parts of the world now, we're starting to have climate financial disclosures, which require organisations to do exactly what I said there: measure, reduce, and report, in order to complete their in order to make sure they're compliant with law, but also to make sure they are keeping their stakeholders happy. And stakeholders in the context of a business could be the government or the legal authorities. It could be your shareholders, your bankers, people like that, your investors. It could be your customers, and businesses these days have to very much think about the external view, so their customers' view of a business. And in years to come, I expect we're going to see large-scale consumer shifts, which are going to be driven entirely by the perception of a business's green credentials. You know, businesses certainly don't want to be caught up in the sort of greenwashing type environments. And finally, of course, your final stakeholder is your teams. You know, whilst we target the business as our client, we also work directly with the employees of that business, and your team members are, you know, they generate all the value for your business. Your team is important. They're hard to recruit. They're hard to train. They're difficult to keep hold of. But they're still people, right? And they still see the same news that you see. They still see the same TV reports about how the world is going to end. And therefore, we try and give them some education around their own movements, about how they can move better on a personal level and make better decisions on behalf of your business when it comes to how they move around, which all has a positive impact. And I would say there, our message is always to people and organizations: lots of small changes add up to much greater change over time. Let me just give you a sort of insight of what we're talking. So this is a bit of insight into the business. So we've proven tech stack and our own IP. This is all stuff we developed. At an individual level, you'll see on the right hand side there, we use various apps to communicate with the employee. That happens to be my route to work this morning. So we do all this automatically. There is no data required. We collect the data automatically. There's no manual data input required. And that environment there in the middle of the picture there changes based on how you as an individual are traveling. So if I'd been in a car today all day, then the clouds would be out, the trees would be dying, and it would be a much darker environment. I was on the train this morning, so that's not too bad, and I've done some walking. So as a result, the sun is out, and if I turn the volume up on the app, then the birds will be singing in the trees as well. So it gives people a very quick visual feel about a very quick, relatable insight into how their movement today and how much carbon that has created, so they can start to modify it. At a corporate level, at a business level, we give them a snapshot, and they get this snapshot at midnight every night. They will be able to see exactly how much carbon their organization has created based on the carbon, the mode of transport, and the distance. They'll see that sliced up. They'll start to immediately get a feeling of whether they've created more carbon today versus yesterday, last week and last month, and so on and so on. So once an organization starts to visualize where that carbon is coming from and how it's being created, then they can then start to think about how they're going to change things moving forward. You know, that visualization is vital. And in this case, obviously, we'd need to add more cycles into to keep up with all the cycle couriers running around Tripoli at the moment, the sounds of it, which is a good thing. Finally, just as I said, we're based in the UK, but we're now working throughout Europe, UK, Europe. We've just got our first customers looking at this in Asia at the moment. We'd love to be working with people in Africa and Lebanon as well, and throughout the Middle East. So we're on a process of growth now. We've got customers already on board. We work as a software as a service platform. We have various marketplaces built into the app, and finally, there's also obviously the data powered by TripShift, as we call it there. That's the database we're building, which in future generations we think will be pivotal in how cities, smart transport organisations build and plan for the changes in their infrastructure required. I think that's about me in terms of timing. I've done a really quick run through there. A slightly different perspective coming from coming at the business perspective, but most of us have employees, most of us have people that are all involved in business. So therefore, we take the view that businesses need to get this right, and businesses need to set the example and bring their employees with them as they develop. Really happy to take any questions at the end, or in fact now, but I'll hand back to you, Samar.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think, we're probably going to just wait until the end and do the quick Q&A, just for ease. Alex, we can, I think, move on to you, hear from you, and then we'll be ready for a discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Am I audible enough? Perfect.
Yes, you are. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. So let me just share my screen. Just a bit. All right. You can see this?
Yeah.
I hope
not yet. No, we can't share it. I think we're going to see it now. 1 second. Yep.
Perfect.
We're good.
Perfect. All right. So I am Alex Mazo. I'm the GM for Equator Mobility. So just let me go back to this. Sorry, just a minute. Yeah. So I'm the GM for Equator Mobility. My background is in engineering. So Equator Mobility is of Nairobi, Kenya, and we are the first provider of fully electric commercial vehicles. So one of the problem statements that we found out was, or rather is, commercial vehicles have the biggest impact in terms of electrification. So if you think about the food we eat, the medicine we take, everything around us has at some point been carried by a logistic vehicle. So we thought the biggest impact will be to start with the biggest contributor to either global warming or the carbon footprint, that being the transport sector, and hence why we started with this. So we've been alive for the past 2 years, and our major market is mostly logistic vehicles. So this is either last mile delivery and hotel transport and corporate transport. So this is you're either going to the office or you go to the airport and things like that. We aim to improve the Kenyan lives by offering a scalable and an efficient transport model. The reason for this is in the past 2 years, fuel prices in Kenya has risen over 100%. So from anywhere between $0.50 to about $1.5 right now. So we thought that transport costs have the biggest impact towards the final costs in the goods that we end up using. So by mitigating this costs in terms of how much it will cost to transport a good from either the workshop or factory to the end user, then either the goods will be cheaper or they will be they'll be marginally cheaper as compared to if they were transported by, say, a diesel or a petrol. So one of the things that we concentrated on, Nairobi is a pretty small city in that you can go from A to B in an hour. So one of the things that we noticed was our range has to be more than 200 kilometers. So currently all our vehicles go above 250 kilometers. So this just ensures you have a lot of trips from the warehouse to the end customer, back to the warehouse, and to another customer. So in essence, you're able to do more than one trip in a day, either delivering goods or people. So I have just a basic overview. So there is a table just to show the sort of savings that we're talking about. Just note that this is in Kenyan shillings, but you can just get the overall gist of this. So one of our vans that the logistic company uses is a BYD-T3 from China. For it to cover 100 kilometers, you need about 15 kilowatts. So this is a bit technical. So 15 kilowatts is a unit of electricity. And in Kenya, that currently would cost about 20 shillings. So this is about 0.5 cents of a dollar, give or take. If you compare that with an equivalent in petrol, you'll need about 12 liters, which will cost you about $20 for the same, about $18-20 for the same. So generally, if you look, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Generally, if you look at the annual fuel cost, or rather the amount of power, the amount of money you need for power, we are talking of about roughly $800 as compared to about $6,000 and things like that. So if you compare the costs you'll need to charge your vehicle as opposed to how much you need to fuel your vehicle, we are talking about over 85% savings. And again, keep in mind, most electric vehicles have less moving parts, so which will ideally mean less fleet maintenance. So there's very little breakdowns because electric vehicles have 90% less moving parts as opposed to normal fuel vehicles. So which means less downtime, less fuel thefts, less things to worry about, things like coolant and things like that. So the only things that you have is things like shock suspensions, which are just consumables. So currently we target logistics vehicles, logistics fleets. The reason is we started off a lease because Kenya being in Africa, we are a developing country. So the amount of money needed to acquire a vehicle is expensive as compared to if we were in UK. But however, by leasing, we get these companies to sort of try out the technology, see how much they save as compared to their petrol and their diesels and things like that. So currently, all our vehicles are out for leasing, whereby we take care of all the backend, so the insurance, maintenance, support, and things like that is handled by the company. So the only bills that our clients will take care of is the driver and charging. However, we do install the charging infrastructure at their premise. So another interesting is, and I think this also just brings to Andrew's presentation, we also monitor our carbon footprint. So this is one of our dashboards of our chargers. So an example is in the last 1 week, we've used about 440 kilowatts of power, and we've saved 189 kgs of carbon, and we've replaced 211 liters of fuel. So this is the savings that will be passed down to our clients, so that they know how much they're saving as compared to if they were using petrol or diesel and things like that. So we have this platform that thanks, Andrew. So we have this platform that we show the clients by saying, by shifting to electric, this is how much fuel you've saved, this is how much you've been using in the past 1 week, and this is your carbon footprint. So we do track all this data, and we're able to relay this to the clients and end users, and even other people who are willing to come into the electrification field. We've had our vehicles out for more than a year now, and we can comfortably say we've never had any of them back for maintenance and things like that, which is good because if you're looking at how much you'd be saving in a fleet, any downtime is money out of your pocket and things like that. So this is one of our vans that is pegged to a logistic company called Sendi. So Sendi are doing last mile deliveries. So if you order something, they will consolidate all the orders and then they'll be delivered to you. So it has 300 kilometers of range and it has 700 kgs of loading capacity. So this is appended to logistics. We also have this hotel transport, which is pegged to one of our clients' trademark hotels. So this is just for doing hotel transfers, corporate transfers, and things like that. So this is a nice picture of our vans and windmill at the back. The reason for this picture actually is Kenya is 95% relying on renewable energy. So we're using hydro, we're using geothermal and wind. So we thought this to EV, you're not burning coal to power your car, you're not burning diesel to power your car, but you're using a full renewable energy to for your car. So yeah, that's a little about Equator Mobility and me. Thank you.
What sort of strategy to go with?
Thank you, Alex. And thank you all three for really truly interesting and quite varied actually presentations, but all pretty much address the same issue. We, because time's tight, I'm going to jump into the questions. We have gathered a couple of questions, I think, for Nadir and Andrew. And so maybe I'll give priority to participants' questions. So let me go ahead and read the questions. So I'll start with Nadir. Nadir, you have two questions. One says, aside from the environmental added value, how does Wasil compare to conventional delivery services? And how has promoting the cycling industry been received in Lebanon?
All right, so to answer your question, thank you so much. To answer the question, number one is the reason why a lot of people are flocking into using Wasil. I mean, we have an overload now of the demand, to be honest. Like, we're short on drivers, we have so much demand. We're even working on weekends, Saturday and Sunday. And the reason why is because a lot of people, first of all, they like cycling as a new concept, of course, of delivery. And number two is that because they care about the environment without really having to be part of anything, basically, just using that service. And number three is, of course, because we're cheaper. Like, the delivery with motorized vehicles is a lot more expensive than bicycles. With bicycles, we can keep our costs down. We don't really spend any money on maintenance, on anything, basically. We just put a guy on a bike or a girl on a bike and they keep delivering. So that is number one. And number two is regarding the promotion of cycling. The reason why I'm so strict sometimes with the drivers that they need to wear the helmet, the gloves, they need to wear the t-shirt, put rear and front lights on the bike, especially at night. The reason why we're doing this is because, apart from that, my work as a bicycle mayor, we've always been promoting cycling as a means of transport. And now that I've started this business, it needs to be a model for all the cyclists in Tripoli. So now, anytime that you happen to see or witness a Wasil driver passing by, you're always gonna be left with an impression that, wow, they're really professional, these guys. They're not joking. They're not just a project.
Thank you, Nadir. I think I'll move on with the other questions as well. If we have time at the end to just have an open discussion, we'll definitely do that. So Andrew, there are a few questions. I think there were a couple of questions that were the same, so I'll just gather them. So one question is about where does the data gathered go? And actually, another question is, where was this data taken for preparing your application? So the question is about data. Where was it taken from, and where does it go? And are there collaborations being done on the level of research institutions and governmental institutions? So your work is obviously with business corporations. So I think the question is about, does it connect to institutions, governmental and research? And well, let's do those. And then I think there's a third question about what research data was taken for preparing this application for calculating CO2 or carbon footprint. So I think, the idea of where the data has been taken from, how is it being shared or with whom, and the connection to research.
Okay, so the connection to research is something we're starting to build out at the moment in terms of collaboration and partnership opportunities. The reason we're just starting to do that is because actually there wasn't very much in the market at all. There's quite a lot of data around, electric vehicles or changing, or electrifying fleets and getting people to move away from cars. There's very little data around how people change behavior, how you change movement patterns. And what there was anecdotal rather than data driven. And we combine that with the business issue that the businesses had this problem now coming onto them, which was being forced onto them by legislation. But tracking movement data is really difficult to do. It's one of those things that upsets people from a privacy point of view as well. So just bear with me on the data and the privacy. I'll come back to that. But typical, before we started TripShift, the typical approach from businesses was to try and collate this data just using financial information. And what I mean by that is they would have a list of obviously business expenses where they were paying for rail tickets, air tickets, cars, petrol, whatever that looks like. They would have those financial transactions, or they would have the details of those financial transactions. But normally those, just because they are financial transactions, they take you a while to collect and reconcile. So they would end up with a reconciled number maybe 3-4 months after the event or after that particular operation. But that's just financial data. It doesn't tell them anything about carbon. So then they had to try and convert that with some sort of conversion equation into a carbon equivalent, which at best was going to be an average, and you know, it has to be fairly inaccurate just because of that financial conversion. So that was their starting point. It would take businesses months and months to collate the data, to end up with this financial transaction and analysis. And of course, they don't really understand the data that it's given. It doesn't do them any, it gives them a number, but it doesn't show them how they can start to make changes and how they can start to reduce their emissions over time. So that was our starting point. In terms of the data and in terms of the data accuracy, then we change that based on where you are in the world. And what I mean by that is in the UK, for example, we use the UK government standards as our benchmark because that's applicable to us in the UK. If we were in Europe, we would use the EU standards, America, the US standards, Lebanon, you know, the Lebanese government standards, whatever that looks like. We would apply those basic standards so that you would always get those government standards as your minimum sort of benchmark of accuracy. In terms of your own vehicles and things like that, the more data you give us to set the accounts up, the better we can make it. So obviously, if we know, in the case of Alex, if we knew Alex had a fleet of, I think he said Nissan U30 vans or whatever, then as soon as we know that information, we will give you the specific emissions for that exact vehicle fleet, and therefore that improves your accuracy again. And of course, what we're doing is we're measuring the actual journey based on the mode of transport. So we understand where you're moving and we understand how you're moving. And therefore, once we've got those two bits, we can then decide exactly how much carbon that specific journey created. Sorry, excuse me. So that's basically how the platform works. In terms of the data we create, then that goes in 3 different directions. So the individual, if you're the employee, you get your own data back all the time. So we make the app available to individuals completely free. They're in the app stores for various mobiles now. They're completely open and free to use, because there's an important education piece in there. And if people start to pick up changes on their own back, then that's absolutely great and perfect. If you're using the app as a company app, then your business data associated with that phone goes back to the company, but it goes back to the company in an anonymous form. So the employer can't track you individually, but they can track your journey, but it's always anonymized. So they don't know, your employer isn't going to know where if you work normal office hours, whatever that looks like, they're not going to know where you go in the evening. They're not going to go, all those sort of details, because they're obviously personal to you. TripShift itself retains all of that data, again, anonymously. So we don't associate that data with any individuals within our database. And that data is then what we will look to push back into the research opportunities that may come up with universities, academic institutions, whatever it looks like, cities. So we're doing quite a lot of work with, in the context of the UK, we're doing quite a lot of work with London and Transport for London in how they start to shape, how they start to understand more passenger flows and actually start to understand that from the perspective of changing behaviour over time. so that they can work out, where when it comes to building new transport infrastructure, what do they need, and more importantly, where do they need it? Because a lot of transport infrastructure, certainly in Europe, hasn't significantly changed in 50, 60 years. The difference as we've increased the volumes on those transport routes, but we haven't actually changed the routings, and those routings don't necessarily reflect what we want future smart cities to look like. Think of a city, in Paris at the moment, they're trying to build a 15-minute city where wherever you are in the city, all of the essential infrastructure that you need to live your life, whether that's shops, work, leisure, culture, whatever that looks like for you, is within a 15-minute sort of reachable radius of where you live. So if you're making those fundamental changes to cities, fundamentally you've got to start thinking about how you do things differently, and that has to be data driven in this case. It can't be the cost and the implications of doing some of this stuff wrong. Will be harmful to the economy, it will be harmful to the environment, and it will probably make life a pain for all of us. So that's really that sort of how we approach the data, and how we own the data, and how we manage the data.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I have some comments, but I'll wait until we ask Alex a question from the audience, and then I think we can continue this very interesting conversation. So Alex, there's a question that says, in your opinion, and looking at current market trends in your location, is customer behavior tilting towards sustainable transport? i.e., is the return on cost for using sustainable transport slowly overcoming fuel-based transport, or does it remain a luxury? And I think this is also a sort of a cultural reflection, which even Andrew's comment on 15-minute city and this data, there is a cultural layer, I think, also about everything that you guys are doing. And based on, the culture, the context, we will obviously see, different results and different behavior. But Alex, would you like to maybe address?
Yes. So there is a shift. However, it's a bit small, and the reason for that is so we don't have any tax incentives for having electric vehicles in Africa, or rather in Kenya, as opposed to something what you'd have in, say, UK, Japan, US, and the likes. So that makes the capex for acquiring these cars really high. And then, unfortunately, we have to pass down that cost. However, there are conversations with the government currently to just reduce the taxes and give us a waiver period for, say, 5 years. So just to have to make the EVs at least price comparative to other cars. And then once this happens, then we'll have more people shift, because people are willing to shift. It's just that the cost is a bit high at the moment. However, the people who are already seeing the benefits of going towards electric vehicles and things like that, and they're already shifting towards that. However, the numbers will blow up once we have the incentives that the government will provide. So yeah, and again, we're mostly following what the West is doing. So if most people in the West are going EV, then chances are we'll go EVs, because all our vehicles are coming from the West. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. So, so I think I have a question that maybe also sort of ties the three presentations. And I wrote this question. So I want to read the question, but then I would like to tell you why I wrote this question. So my question was, in a world whereby inequality, this includes access to resources, governments, economic prosperity, etc., is rampant, how are poor and vulnerable communities expected to or encouraged to be environmentally conscientious when economic survival is a priority for them today? And I think, the answer will probably be different from one country or region to the other, because even in terms of public transportation, the culture and the availability of public transportation is completely different from one country or region to the other. So a 15-minute city, for instance, in Paris does exist here in Beirut, or does exist in Lebanon, but a responsible or credible public transportation system, or trust in government, for instance, is absent here. And I would probably assume Kenya would have similar cultural problems to Lebanon. So my question is about justice, and the reason I ask this is because it seems like, and Alex's last comment about we follow the West, it seems like this is a problem that is going to require global scale kind of solutions or conversation around solutions. So where are we contextualized and where are we not? Where are we global, I guess, in the, the problem of sustainability and transportation or climate change? Where do we work contextually and where do we work on a global scale? So one, maybe just the background of why I'm asking this question. There was an article in The Guardian by Amy Westerveld, which the title was Telling People to Follow the Science, and this is about climate change, won't save the planet, but they will fight for justice. So the idea is about, there is sort of a request from researchers and entrepreneurs to transform or translate this data of science into data of justice. And the reason is, she takes an example in the US that less than 40% of people in the US are college educated. So in some ways they lack the discourse of language to understand climate change and pretty much what we're talking about in this session. So what's the language that we can maybe turn this problem into through utilizing this idea of justice and the commitment of people to justice and liberating themselves from injustice? So I hope my question is understood, but I leave it open for us to discuss it. So whoever would like to chime in, please go ahead.
I can go first.
Go ahead, Alex.
So one thing we've noticed is, so in Africa, climate change, or rather the whole notion of climate, it's very on a very minute level, because for lack of better words, it does not affect us directly. Of course, there is some impact of climate change and things like that. However, for us, if you think about it, unemployment is rife, there's lack of basics and things like that. So if I go to the next guy and tell them, move towards electric vehicles because of climate change, it wouldn't make sense. But if I take a bicycle, an electric bike, an electric motorcycle, and an electric car and tell them, if you use this electric bike, instead of you taking $10 home, now you'll be taking $15. That makes sense to them. So that's, and I think that's now where the justice would come. The electrification not only be segmented to say the people who can afford it, but now it will come down to, if I go towards an EV, then I'll save much more. There's less breakdowns and things like that. And then now it starts to make sense even to guys at the bottom of the pyramids and things like that. And for guys in Kenya, it's the savings that make sense. It's not the whole idea of climate change is an afterthought after you've saved money. So it's save money first, then the climate comes. If they come together, then that makes sense. But now I think it'll take a while before the climate comes before the money. So
well, we have an economic crisis, so yeah, I would imagine we have to, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I have to put food in my mouth before I think about the emissions and things like that. Yeah.
Andrew, Nadir, would you like to?
Yeah.
Andrew, go please.
I'm just trying to formulate. I actually have a view that we need to push into this, right? But everybody, we all read the same news wherever we are in the world. We all see the various news. There's COP27 going on this week. You know, and the media always makes the mistake of, or the mistake in my view in science, actually, science, the media, we're all as bad as each other. They're all as bad as each other in terms of putting the problem in terms of numbers. They make, you know, they talk about millions and millions of tons. So your average person on the street has no concept of what 1 million tons of carbon looks like. They don't know what a kilo of carbon looks like. And frankly, they're more interested in, Alex said, of making sure they've got enough food to support the family or whatever, you know, enough income to support the family. So we make the mistake of not making the problem relatable. So until you make that problem relatable to everybody and understandable to everybody, which is why we went with a very visual interface into the apps, because you don't need to understand the science. It becomes a relatable message, and you can visually see, actually, okay, I could have done this better, or you can identify what's costing you the most. And I think my link here into sort of moving more sustainably or moving better is a key constituent of that is to change the way we move. And you know, at the top end of the market, that will be people converting their own personal cars to electric or whatever that looks like, hybrid in the future, or hybrid in the interim and electric in the future. But that's still quite an expensive option. But actually, the best thing we can all do from reducing emissions in the city and urban environments is to start using shared public transport. And the process of building better commercial or public transport operations reduces massively your, you know, if they're well utilized, well funded, well supported, doing all the right stuff, then that reduces your emissions footprint significantly. And actually, I would argue at that point, acts as a leveler in terms of that justice and equity argument that you were pushing there, Smart. It is a little bit subjective. There's a long way to go. But I think at the moment the sustainability argument is pushed in the wrong direction. If you listen to the climate activist end of the argument, they push the arguments that we should never travel again. I think that would be a terrible idea. You know, I love traveling, whether that's business or pleasure, and I've been fortunate to do a lot of it. And you know, they would, again, my aviation background, you know, if you speak to 9 out of 10 people in the streets, they will probably at the moment tell you that the worst thing to do for climate, or the worst climate transport, will be a plane. The concept of jumping on a plane. Of course, that isn't the reality at all. That's what the media would like you to listen to, you know, talking about private jets and planes flying around the world. The worst thing to do with your sustainability is to jump in that petrol car and drive 1.5 miles to work each day and 1.5 miles back, or whatever it looks like. The better thing to do would be to jump on public transport, jump on a bike, walk, run, whatever they are. They're better for your health, they're better for the environment, and it's achievable. It doesn't have to be jumping the whole hog and, you know, moving the goal, changing the goalpost to an impossible level. It's about small changes, and those changes add up, and over time actually, you know, support the social justice side of sustainability, whilst also allowing us all to enjoy the benefits of moving around. But you know, my argument is we should continue to move, but we need to move better. And a key part of that is giving people the understanding to allow them to make better decisions around their movement.
I agree with you. I don't think the language should be either this or that. We obviously, even in terms of fossil fuels, we found out that we still need them, and we're not going to be able to just completely, and I agree with you. I just think we need to have, as you said, an educated population, so that when we do talk about models, that will still rely on unsustainable, I guess, sources. It's towards transitioning out of it. But I think people, unfortunately, because things are not understood in terms of data and numbers, they assume it's an either or situation. And we haven't been able, I think, as researchers to communicate, as you said, there. And realistically, no one wants to stop traveling. Absolutely.
But
and
people very quickly change if you give them the ammunition and the understanding in order to drive that change.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, if people don't know any different, then what are they to do? They've still got to get from A to B, whatever that looks like to them, whether it's a 15-minute city or a 2 hours congestion or whatever. Until you give them an understandable alternative, and they understand the benefits of that alternative, and it is economically affordable and all the other stuff, then you're not going to make those changes. But those are the changes that society in general has to push through. Again, to go back to those headline numbers, the magic numbers, 25% of global carbon emissions is transport related. And in the business context, 75% of a business's scope 3 footprint is transport related.
Right.
They are huge numbers. They're a niche, but they're huge numbers. If you start to change that picture, then the emissions as a result come down very quickly.
I agree. I mean, as you said, COP27 is happening right now in a country where justice is not obviously upheld, but every social media post is about that 1.5 degrees Celsius that, you know, we're trying to achieve, and no one knows what's really behind the, you know, 1.5 Celsius degree that world leaders hold. But yeah, I think the language has to change very urgently. Nadir, would you like to comment?
Yeah, Samar, yeah, thank you. I'm just going to say something really quickly regarding just justice and accessibility. Back when I was a bicycle mayor before the crisis, and I was always not only me, but also the community where we were promoting cycling, people would make fun of us, basically. They would just mock us down and say, well, you're thinking about the bicycle, we're thinking about food right now. But now, because when I started Wasit and we're paying people to cycle, we're receiving applications by the tens and the hundreds. People really want to cycle now. And just like what happened in multiple cities around the world, Strasbourg and Amsterdam and others, bicycles were used in times of crisis, but they stayed. People decided to keep the bicycles, even when the crisis was lifted or when things got better. And I want to hide to you, like I'm right here. I'm in Genova right now in Italy, and I was in Amsterdam last week. And here, people in this part of the world, they complain about the train got late today, 2 minutes late. I mean, this is probably the end of the world. But if you take the same kind of complaints, take them back to Lebanon, people will still make fun of you. So this is what I'm saying. Like, it's a perfect example. Sometimes when we advocated for cycling in the past, people would of course take it very lightly, but now they're taking it very seriously and they really want to do it.
Well, as you said, I think we have an opportunity now. It's amazing that things usually are sort of more fruitful or more creative out of need. And honestly, as researchers, as entrepreneurs, we need to take advantage also of this sort of global moment, or a Lebanon, not moment, it's been a long moment. But actually that maybe brings me to a final question, and we really have 1 minute. But I would like, since everyone here is within the entrepreneurship field, so how, and moving forward, everything is becoming sort of also internet-based or virtual-based. People are now becoming economically independent because of, having access to generating economy through the virtual world, not just, being in. So even if you're in a crisis country, you have another sort of platform to generate income, and entrepreneurship could fall sort of within that. But how can we mainstream it? How can we mainstream this concept of entrepreneurship within the vulnerable communities, which are the majority of our populations and which sort of lack the access and understanding of entrepreneurship? Because it seems like this is the future, really, the scale and the nature of entrepreneurships to tackle global issues. So can we mainstream it? I'm not sure if my question is relevant, but it makes sense. Go ahead.
Summer in Wasil, at Wasil, basically, we talk about entrepreneurship on a daily basis, and the fact that almost all of them are university graduates, and they do have it in the back of their minds that they, one day in the future, they want to start their own business. We keep talking about it. They keep asking me questions related to the problems related to the business itself and doing business. But I also want to say it's all about leaving impact. If you're successful as a business and you make a positive impact in society, no matter how you measure that impact, to be honest, as long as you're making that impact and you're visible through that impact and people know about what you're doing, I think this is by itself enough to promote entrepreneurship among the community.
Thank you. And Andrew, Alex, any final thoughts, comments, whether on this or anything else? Andrew.
I guess my final point actually relates to the last comment that Nadir was making about the fact in Lebanon, the cyclists had been had been a target of fun for a while. It's been interesting in the UK. There's a really big change going on in the UK at the moment, which is actually electric or electric assisted bikes. And that is seeing a huge transition in the UK. They're not cheap at the moment, which is a barrier. However, that transition to an electric bike where the act of cycling is not such a big physical challenge is causing a huge shift in behavior in the UK. People who would normally not be seen near a bike, who live in a hilly environment, or may not be as fit as they would like, are now getting electric bikes because it's cheaper to run and cheaper and easier to do and achievable for them as an individual, and getting them out of cars. So your time may come over there in Tripoli, and you'll be able to ride down the road very soon with on an electric bike and have people envious of you.
Hopefully, inshallah.
Alex, any final comments or reflections? Please go ahead.
Well, at least you guys have trains. Yeah, it just doesn't come in a year.
Trains first, then bicycles in Kenya. Yes.
Yeah. No. To be honest, I think just as Andrew was saying, you really need to give guys a choice, either or. The whole concept of mobility is for it to make sense, for it to be cheaper, efficient, and make sense to the masses. If Well, we all understand the benefits of going electric, things like that. But at the end of the day, efficiency is what really actually makes sense. If it'll take me, say, an hour to the office, and then if all of us now go into a bus and now it takes 15 minutes because there's less traffic, we're saving the environment, and at the same time, we're saving money because instead of me fueling my 5-seater car for just one person and going 15 kilometers, now I'm paying a fraction of that inside a bus just to go the same place, and it's efficient. Then that makes sense. And I think as the world shifts, that we also need to understand that by just incorporating efficiency into our daily lives, into our transport systems, into our logistic systems, into everything that we do, then it starts to make sense. So yeah, that's mostly it. And this is interesting.
Thank you so much. And I agree, it's very interesting. And maybe I can conclude with just saying that this is actually a very unique sort of time for, people like you guys, entrepreneurs and researchers like myself and Mariam, because, we work directly with the communities here. I specifically work with refugees in Lebanon, and I am seeing that behaviors are changing out of obviously out of a latent crisis and out of a real need, but it seems like instead of sort of losing hope, people become more creative and willing to be innovative, actually. And when things are comfortable, we don't really see that much drive within the, people maybe want to maintain status quo when they're comfortable, but when things are uncomfortable, people are willing to try new things. And that's, unfortunately, we this crisis might be longer than we think, even on a global level, but I think there is hope that if we work together very well, and we need to keep these conversations because, as we said, there is obviously a very dire need about changing the conversation nature so that it's not just within experts. The public can start understanding us, without having to have a mediator. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, but I honestly think this is a very unique time that we can capitalize on impact within, this time. Thank you so much, everyone. This has really been a very short conversation, but a very interesting one. And I think it's obvious that we need to have more sessions like this. Thank you for everyone who organized it. I'm not sure if Mariam would like to say a last thank you, or should I conclude it?
Yes, thank you all. That's all I want to say. Very interesting conversation.
Thanks. Yes, and we will have more, hopefully, yes, in the near future. And maybe in the 3 different geographies, UK, Kenya, and Lebanon, physically there. So I look forward to us having a meeting again, hopefully. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.